Hello, my name is Gina Clifford, and I am joined by Louise Mowbray, and together we are in conversation. Today, we're excited to welcome Jonathan Powers, an associate professor of arts and humanities at Minerva University, to talk with us and have a conversation about generative AI. Jonathan, without further ado, please introduce yourself and give us a little bit more information about yourself and what brings you here today.
Sure, and I'll be brief because you can look me up on LinkedIn. But the two things that I'd like to talk about for me and that I think are relevant for this conversation are first a word about Minerva and then a word about myself and how I'm approaching AI. So like what my stance on it will be. So that'll help listeners understand. So Minerva University is a Challenger University. Go look it up. So it's a rising university, first graduating class in 2019. So it's very young. All of the students live together, but they move through 7 world cities over the course of their 4-year program. So they're moving semester by semester to Taipei, to Seoul, Buenos Aires. So they're in a variety of different cultural environments. All of the classes are online. So this changes the dynamic considerably when we talk about assessment, when we talk about, sort of the culture of the class. And then the other thing that's distinctive is the number of countries that they come from. So they come from over 100 different nationalities are represented in our student body, and we only have a few hundred students. So it is absolutely mind-blowing how diverse every group is. This gives me, and then the word about myself, which is that although I've held a variety of positions in government, nonprofit management, et cetera, teaching has always been at the heart of how I approach things. I like approaching things from a pedagogical perspective, from a how do you grow people? How do you help them become the best version of themselves, develop the skills that they want. So that is kind of my overall perspective. And so, sort of you throw AI into that mix of that general perspective that I have in the particular position that Minerva University has, and some surprising things come up. So I hope we'll be able to talk a little bit about that as we go forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. I think, this is going to be a great conversation because Louise and I have been talking about different topics and how they relate to AI. And it seems like everything comes back to education and training because it's affecting the workforce. And Jonathan, you before we started recording this conversation, you were talking about some statistics. You and Louise were throwing out some interesting and jaw-dropping statistics. It would be interesting if you could share those numbers with us again, and Louise pipe in about what you think, because that's a great way to kick off this conversation.
Yeah, this is the greatest thing about conversations when you're online is you can just pull stuff right up off the internet. So I'm pulling this from Ars Technica, but I think Reuters also reported it. There was a UBS investment bank research notes that reported that ChatGPT in particular reached an estimated 100 million active monthly users in 2 months. And this made it the fastest growing consumer product in history, which is just an indicator of how many people see potential in this particular product.
That's quite incredible. And I think the thing that popped into my mind when you said that, Jonathan, is that I saw something about Threads reaching 100 million in less time. And although I think that they had a sort of rocket start, but it looks like things slowed down pretty quickly for Threads. Of course, one of the downsides of joining Threads, I don't know do you have anyone here got a Threads? I'm not even sure what to call it. Threads feed? No, not yet.
No, not going to happen.
Apparently, if you want to leave Threads, you also have to leave Instagram. You have to close your Instagram account.
That's my caveat for not joining, really, because yes.
Well, once you're in, you're in. So probably their attrition rate will be quite low if people are interested in keeping their Instagram going. This whole question about education it was probably one of the very first things that popped right out of I don't know what to call it, the furor about generative AI and large language models. This massive sort of, I guess, fear-based headlines and discussions about how are students ever going to learn anything? What does learning mean? People are going to cheat. We saw within, I think, a couple of months or a month even, there was a student, I think at Stanford, who had already produced some software that would be able to detect an AI written thesis or essays. Jonathan, what are your thoughts around the whole question of, it's for me, it sounds very much, it's this or that. And I've really come to think of AI as much more of a hybrid solution. We'll be living with it. I mean, it's here to stay. It certainly isn't going anywhere, and become integrated in all of our processes. How will AI become a healthily integrated part of learning?
Uh, so the cheating part, I just want everyone to they're already cheating. Like everybody already cheating. So the problem is not that AI is going to help people cheat. The problem is that we have the kind of system, a grade-based system where we create artificial scarcity that lets people cheat, that encourages people to cheat. So we have a system that is a system that rewards a certain kind of behavior. And a certain kind of, sort of only a few people are going to get A's, no matter how many people perform really well. So of course they cheat, especially in a high stakes thing where getting an A actually means you get a better job. So we've created a system where cheating is inevitable. So of course they cheat. The point about how AI is going to help us learn, I think the number one way is that AI is actually a pretty good explainer. And I think one of the classic mistakes that humans make is we mistake the special case for the general case. And we do this all the time in personal level. We mistake our experience for everyone's experience, or the experience of us and our 150 friends, our Dunbar number of contact. We say, oh, everybody's doing it as like, well, AI is actually, there's a whole lot of people who don't even have the internet. So of course they're not involved in this AI revolution, except indirectly. So it behooves us to sort of say the special case of the school system that we know and grew up in. That is actually a really odd historical oddity, and it isn't the general case for human learning. So when we look at how AI is going to impact it, I'm kind of getting off track here, aren't I? Let me go back to the question. So the basic idea here is that AI is a good explainer. Teachers do way more than just explain, is where I was headed with this. But we've gotten this idea that what a teacher is fundamentally an explainer. There's somebody who stands up in front of the class and explains things before students even have a question. Let me explain quadratic equations. Nobody's asked the teacher to do this. AI is actually an improvement on this. You ask AI what you want to know, and AI explains it. And it does a pretty good job, not necessarily in a single question, but in a line of questions. Like if you have half of an understanding of something, boy, I've played with like Khanmigo, the Khan Academy's version of AI. It's really good at explaining concepts that are well understood.
Yeah, Sal Khan did a TED Talk and demoed kind of what
great tool
that tool looks like. And just from seeing that,
very impressive.
I was like, man, I wish I had that when I was in school. It would have helped accelerate my learning. And then I could have spent a lot more time talking with the teacher about things that were questions about how to make, contextual questions about what that means for the world, or how do I apply that, and what does it mean for something that maybe is outside of math or science that, that a person could relate to and give you their personal experience and, perceptions of things. Whereas now it sounds like teachers spend all their time with curriculum, and it's very rigid, and students don't really have that opportunity to connect as humans, right? We're almost connecting as somebody's sharing the information and the students are just taking it in, and we can ask some questions that are relevant directly to the math problem or the science being demonstrated, but there's probably not a lot of time for just questions about how what this means in the bigger picture of life and contextual.
Yeah, we cover the material, which is a big red herring in education. So I think a useful distinction to introduce here is between learning and teaching. Humans learn automatically, unconsciously, constantly. So students who are in a classroom and they may test terribly on math. Maybe one of the things that they were learning is not to listen to this jerk in front of them because they're not a nice person and don't really have their interests at heart. They're just showing up and I've seen a handful of teachers who have done this. Just show up. They're just, they show up, they don't really care, they deliver their lecture, they go. Why would I listen to anybody who treated me that way? I mean, that's just a normal human response. So the humans in the room, the students, have learned, they are learning not to pay attention to this person because they don't show respect. The learning is constant, but it's not manageable. We can't tell you what to learn. You learn what you learn based on your own interests and what you already know. You learn based on your own perspective. It's completely based on that particular human circumstances. Teaching, however, is manageable. We can say, this is what's going to be taught in this classroom. This is the curriculum. This is how long it will take. This is the assignments. Like, all of that is manageable. So teaching is a process that we can manage. Learning is not one that we can manage. So when we often say, like, will the students learn? And I was like, we can't stop them. We couldn't stop them if we tried. But if you're saying, how can we get them to learn math at a moment where we're not sure that they have some interest in math, but not a huge interest in math? How can we strengthen that interest and make it grow into really knowing and understanding math? That's a different question than, can we put somebody in front of them who tells them what, the quadratic equation is? That we can do, and then we can tick the box. Oh yeah, they now know the quadratic equation. I'm not sure they do.
They've been exposed to it. It's all we can
exposed to it. I love that one. Like it's a bacterium or something. It's a disease.
Yeah, or something that's meant to be retained for just long enough to
pass the
write
test.
an exam and prove that one can retain this for a short period of time. But the actual application, I think that this question of education is so bizarrely personal because, of course, we've all had an education, whether we might, label it good or decent or good enough or great, it's depending, obviously hugely dependent on the individual. So everybody feels, and this is what I'm seeing in terms of a lot of the discourse, is everybody feels that they have the view on how we learn in education. And as you so rightly said, Jonathan, there's a big difference between teaching and learning. This brings me back to systems, because this question of AI or learning differently or being taught differently throws a lot of questions that have been brewing for a long time up into the air about the systems that we actually use to prepare people for the working world. And actually, why are we doing that anyway? It's almost as if from the moment that we're born, we're sort of lobbed into the system from our first day of junior school, or perhaps even pre-primary. You need to learn this in this period of time, and you pass that exam, and then you move on, and then you get great grades, and it allows you to go to university, and you need to do that because otherwise you won't get a decent job, and if you don't get a decent job, you won't be able to earn enough to have a family and put your kids through the same system, and perhaps buy the second home and have decent holidays and a pension. And it's all this kind of formulaic march onto something more. And, just to share a little story here, all my years in executive search, and of course today consulting with leadership teams, there is this kind of it's an almost palpable sense with a lot of very senior executives who got there, who've always been striving for more. The right name is on the doorway that they walk into in the morning if they're going into the office nowadays. And they've got the right role, it's the right position, they've climbed the ladder, they're earning the right money, they have a second home, and they've sold the yacht because that doesn't make sense anymore. But there's an almost sort of emptiness about, okay, I've done everything in my power in the pursuit of more, and yet, there's no fulfillment. So perhaps just a long, windy way of saying, how do we get back to redesigning? Is this the catalyst that we've been waiting for to shunt us into a redesign of the systems that actually fulfill much more purpose and meaning in life? And I'll chuck it right back at you.
I can hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
I mean,
go, Gina.
Go ahead. Well, I just wanted to give you this, Jonathan. If you hadn't seen the McKinsey report, it's on generative AI, and it was published in June 2023. And on page, I think it's page 40 or something, there's a bar graph that shows the potential for automation due to AI in different industries. And education and workforce training is shown as their estimate with AI, 54%, I guess it's roles can be automated by midpoint 2023 in education and training with AI. And without AI, they're estimating at 15%. But they go through lots of other STEM professionals and office support and food services, production workers, healthcare workers. So not only is it impacting educators, it's also impacting a lot of the things educators, at least in higher education, are preparing people to go into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're talking about this, as Louise said, reimagining a system that's more geared to learning instead of teaching, and this opening up a brain and funneling in the information, we're basically now talking. We have an opportunity to maybe have students engage in learning the way they naturally learn, because everything is changing. So there's an opportunity to think differently about it. I don't know what your perspectives are, Jonathan, and Louise weigh in too on if this is even a little bit true, and even half of the jobs that they surmise will be automated very, very quickly. How does that give an opportunity for education?
Oh, so the natural, so the nerds, sort of act. I'm just going to put on my nerd hat here for a second. So, the classic academic way to look at something like this is, first you have to ask what assumptions they're using in order to come up with those numbers. Because I suspect McKinsey's a careful, thoughtful, analytic team. There's no doubt in my mind that is ballpark, but it depends on how they're thinking about the job. And so if the job is to sit up there in front of the class and speak words at children or at students that, that explain the subject of the day, there's a lot of that can be automated. And to be fair, there's actually a surprising amount. We forget sometimes just how important, knowledge that we have in memory really is. Basic geography, basic mathematical operations, that's what allows you to sort of say that sense of, this feels off to me somehow. Can we ask a deeper question? Like, that capacity of a high-level executive to ask an intelligent, deeper question is predicated very often on knowledge. Sometimes on political knowledge of the people in front of them, sometimes on knowledge of the specifics of the industry. It doesn't make sense for these kinds of numbers to be coming out of our Germany office because I know the Germany office and they da-da-da-da-da-da. That kind of knowledge is actually really important. But we tend to think of knowledge as information. And it's not. It's information plus the structure in which it's organized, which is, for humans, emotional, social. The social part is really important. So we talked, Gina, you mentioned how personal education can be, but the real story of education is a bunch of individuals who gather around a table and they talk about a common issue. And so there's both this individual part of it. We need to have individual students with their individual perspectives challenging each other. And it's, oh gosh, when Fong said that thing about mathematics, I hadn't thought of it that way. And now I see the problem in a new light. That's when I see education, sort of working. It's that kind of exchange. It's when people see things from somebody else's perspective. They borrow the individual perspective of somebody else. So this idea of one person in front of a computer, asking questions, I was like, that's what we all do a little bit when we have a problem and we go in and we ask Google to answer. But then we go back to the conversation that we were in, equipped with our, slightly improved understanding, and check back in. You guys are way more interesting to talk to than Google. And I suspect that, by and large, you're going to be way more interesting to talk to than AI always, not least of which because AI, sort of knows everything that's ever been written, but it literally has had not 1 second of actual experience. It doesn't actually know what it's like to be in a body. It doesn't actually understand what pain is. It doesn't actually, there's no sort of tension, right? We've seen it. You guys saw that story about the lawyers who asked GPT for some cases and GPT just made them up. I was like, it has no sense of the disparity between, sort of that check between things that are actually in the world. It has no concept of what the world is. It can't. So it, like the kind of conversation that you can have with it is pretty interesting. But I'm not yet persuaded that. And what I actually think is going to happen is we're going to actually end up with some pretty interesting test questions or test lines of questioning. You're in chat with somebody, it's like, this is beginning to feel a little bot-ish to me. So you ask one of your test questions, and sure enough, it's, it shows that it's a bot or it shows that it's a person. We're going to figure what those are. It's going to take a little while, but.
Yeah, I think we posted something on LinkedIn, and Louise and I both engaged in that conversation. And I think one of the comments that I made was that I want a hashtag or something to say generated by AI, just for transparency, because it is different to be talking to a bot than a person. And context is important, and transparency is important, because, if you're trying to persuade me to do something and I have a question and it starts getting odd answers back, and I start to feel it's a bot, it starts to feel a little bit ingenuous, right? It's not, doesn't feel authentic to me. And it's like, oh, you're trying to trick me in some way, even if it's just a subconscious feeling as a human. I don't know what you think, Louise, what your thoughts are on that, knowing that a bot is your teacher or your coach or your customer service representative.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, Gina, and I think in some countries I would welcome a bot, simply because there's a language difference, which makes it a real struggle to actually interact with the institution or the organization or the bank or whatever it is that you're trying to get stuff done with. And it's sometimes when I think of making a call to that institution, I'm so frustrated by the process that I know that I'm going to have to go through in order to get probably frustrated at the end of it. And I think we've all had, endless experiences with call centers. That if there's 6 options and number 7 is other, you've got to listen to all 6 before you get to other to speak to a human being. Which is, if we just talk about the frustrations, and call centers have massive turnovers. I think they have a sort of turnover rate of around about 45%. I was looking into it after we saw that app launched the other day. So, Jonathan, just to give you some context, was the app called Air.ai? I think it might have been, Gina, one that you posted. And it was a really amazing conversation between a call center agent who had actually called a customer who'd been tracked, I think, on their website or tracked in some way as digging into buying a Tesla. And what felt to me, first of all, it's American, so it's not my mother tongue, sounds wrong, but it's not my sort of natural way of speaking or interacting with people. But I found that the questions were just the perfect sales funnel. It was done so brilliantly with just a moment's pause that I think once things get a little bit better, they'll iron out the pause, although the pause actually allowed for us to think that perhaps the person was thinking. And what struck me was that how much information the person that the bot was talking to gave up in that conversation about their own lives, the kind of truck they drive, what they're thinking of doing, their life's changing, they're moving to a different city, and they've got, movers coming in, and extraordinarily personal information that could be given out to anyone. And probably, it wasn't dangerous information, but if it kept going, it might have got to much more personal information being given away. So there was, a bunch of alarm bells are going off. And I think I'm with you, Gina. I think there should be, this is an AI. And I know that in the UK, they've been running some tests across different platforms. And people have actually said that they've thoroughly enjoyed interacting with AI in terms of customer service.
Oh my God,
so
yes. Clear answers and
clarity,
complete knowledge of the policy, infallible knowledge of the policy.
So it's specific data. It's not just a broad kind of conversation, and it's not necessarily talking about concepts. As you said, Jonathan, it's talking about very specific things related to a product or a service that you'd probably take a little while to find in writing somewhere online in the T's and C's or privacy policy or something like that.
Oh,
so yeah, I think that the applications, I think people have different feelings about it. For me, if it serves me better, it's way too easy to go okay, yeah, I prefer that. And in some contexts, as I say, in some countries where, perhaps the accent is very strong, or it's difficult to understand, one isn't familiar with the kind of the rhythm of speech, and it just makes sense and makes life one hell of a lot easier. But for some things that require somebody to think about something that isn't a standard request, um, I don't think anything can replace the human. Of course, I'm sure we'll have. So perhaps that's option 7. The other. I
Well,
have a highly unusual situation here. I need to speak to a human being.
Don,
But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Don Norman, so this is the guy who wrote the book, The Design of Everyday Things. He invented the term user experience. So Don Norman has these he said there's no such thing as user error. There's only bad design. And what he means by that is it's a critique of industrial culture. And really the industrial, so we're going to take a bunch of people and they work at the rhythm of the machine. And we really have forgotten just how embedded, like the 8-hour day, the reason there are 8-hour days is because that was the kind of compromise that the workers were able to negotiate with, because the factories can run 24, but the workers can't. So we're accommodating the machine. And so we have this idea, like the machine, the policies of an organization, or sales funnel. A lot of this, we try to come up with this kind of this technical, idea about how we're going to funnel people in, and it works for most cases. It really does. And sales, consumers, customer service. Very often, you're calling to get a simple problem fixed, and you just need the fix of the problem. You're not looking to buy something else. You're getting to fix the problem. And what you really want is somebody who knows how to fix the problem. And AI does. And what we've done is we've tried to train a bunch of people to be robots. And they will act like robots. They will service this machine. It's really a machine model in our minds about how customer service is going to work. And the people are supposed to step into that. AI doesn't care. It's very happy to step into that. Robots in a factory, very happy to do the same thing, the same 14-second thing that you had to do in a Ford factory, happy to do it. It's not a problem. And so it's like we have this idea that, we'd rather talk to a person. No, you don't. You don't want to talk to a person. You want to talk to a person who's going to behave a bit like a slave or a servant, who will just solve your problem for you. What we really want. So here's a good example from education where we get confused. One of the greatest pieces of value that you ever get in a course, in a university course, is the syllabus. We all know this. How many of your friends got the syllabus the first day, went and read everything, took the test at the end, passed the course, done? Never had to attend a single lecture, never had to speak to the professor. This is one standard mode of passing certain kind of course. And the whole point is that what the syllabus is actually the distilled wisdom of a whole field of scholars about how to enter into a complex subject. It's a good way to enter. It's not the only way usually, but a good way to enter into a complex subject that can allow you a graduated approach. And there usually aren't that many of them, which is why there are only a handful of syllabus. So one of the uses that university professors got excited about right away is that you can ask ChatGPT to draw you up a syllabus for any course, and boop, there it is. This actually saves a lot of work, but we thought that it was, it's thinking work. It's fairly robotic. There's not that many of them. They're passed down by tradition. And you can ask the bot to make this a little bit, this accounting course, I want it to be a little bit more about sustainability. Can you bring some of that new literature in? And it does it for you. It does the research and pulls it in for you. It's like, that's clerical. It's great at these things, but we just are not highly aware of the mix in our thinking about how much is clerical and how much is high level, sort of managerial, dividing the work, creating the structure by which will, an executive function, and how much of it is genuinely creative, making connections that are not obvious.
So, Jonathan, I have a question for you based on what you just said, which really makes a lot of sense. That the way our whole capitalist system is set up, it's to be productive and efficient, like a machine. So everyone's having to adapt. No matter what your job is, it doesn't have to be in manufacturing, right? We're all kind of measured on productivity and efficiency at the end of the day, because the more productive you are, the more potential profits that a company can have. So looking at how good AI is at a lot of that production quality, maybe not quality, I don't know, there are some issues with quality, but productivity, and a lot of the work being clerical. I personally think that a lot of the work, the jobs that are out there right now, are jobs that were designed to be productive, efficient, so that if a person quit, you could easily replace them. It's just a job that's, you don't have any downtime or very little. You pull another person from anywhere, they'll have the same skills, they can do the same thing rather quickly, like a machine replacing a part. Now AI is coming in and it's really, really good at that. And the reality is, yeah, those jobs weren't probably that great to begin with, because a lot of those jobs don't pay a lot of money. And they're not fulfilling for humans, because our brains get bored being repetitive little robots when we're not. So my existential question for you is, what happens to higher education especially, because they're preparing people for the workforce, whether that's the right thing or not, that's kind of how it seems like the education system is moving, when there's a couple things happening at the same time. One, companies are now more than ever looking at productivity and efficiency. So AI is going to be adapted as quickly as possible, and already is being, right? And so already you're seeing jobs that were low paying and rudimentary jobs that were repetitive tasks immediately gone. But where do those people go if they need to retrain at a time when college costs, at least in the US, are skyrocketing? Employers aren't really interested in as interested in college education as they used to be, because they really just want people with skills. And now they're going to even use AI for a lot of those jobs. So like, what is the sweet spot for higher ed, where you have AI, you have rising costs, and you have maybe the lack of interest, and of course you have aging populations, so there aren't as many young people coming into college in the next couple of years. So all of those things, where does higher ed fit into all that, and how do they?
Great question.
How does it grow?
Grow. I don't know that it's going to grow. I think it might shrink. That's one scenario that I think we need to think hard about. The growth in education was part of a really an epochal shift in the 50s and 60s, this decision that we would try to sort of distribute the college education very broadly within the sort of the European and North American context. So I think 40% now of Americans have at least some college. I mean, it's very widely spread. Maybe it shouldn't be. I don't know. Like we've certainly seen, it wasn't for my brother as an example. He's one very intelligent person, one of the smartest people I know, but college really wasn't for him. So like, has it become this kind of thing that we force people into? But I don't know. But to the question that you answered, one spot is going to be relationships. AI cannot give you a hug. This is non-trivial, and we forget it sometimes. We're too quick to jump into the sort of the chat model, right? It's a chat GPT, literally. That the chat model is a relationship model, and I was like, this is a very low bandwidth model. There are some great things about low bandwidth. I love texting. It's short, it's efficient, it's fast. Emojis are the best thing ever. I was so suspicious of them at first, and now I'm in love with them. We don't have enough of them yet, in my opinion. Like, where the hell are the rest of my emojis? It's been 10 years. But no hugs, no handshakes, no look in the eye. And this is fundamental. Neurologically, we know it's fundamental. I have a book on my shelf written by Susan Hrack out of Georgia, who talking about it. The book's title is Minding Bodies. If you're an educator, you should go out and read it now. And it's about how our bodies are we are not brains on sticks. And this idea that somehow that education is about your mind is, like, from the Greeks forward, it's always been about the person, not a mind, the person. We don't educate minds, we educate people. And we forget that at our peril. So relationships is going to be a big one. AI is not going to be able to replace that. Another one is trades. AI can help you design, sort of the complex ducting, like in a skyscraper. It's really cool, actually, how it does it. It's really elegant sometimes, the solutions it comes up with, but it can't actually build it. And the odds of it actually being able to build it or to retrofit an existing are very, like, that's not going to happen within not in our lifetime for sure, and probably not within several lifetimes. There are way more problems than people think in construction. So there's a lot of jobs and opportunities left for people to make contributions. We have this weird status associated with theoretical knowledge. We're not even very good at it as a species. We're really not. It's weird. And somehow it's this high status thing.
Jonathan, you just hit on so many things. Actually, I've been writing a lot about this. And one of the things that I say is, AI can't read your body language. Well, if you've got the camera on, actually, I had to put sort of something in brackets there. Unless you have the camera on, it can't read your facial expressions or body language and know that you need a hug. Never mind give you a hug. It's the knowing that you need it, or a smile, or a tap, pat on the back, or it's all the very. And I love what you said about relationships. Interestingly, I know that the World Economic Forum publishes its top 10 skills each year, and I don't know if you watch them every year, but they kind of shift around, and some disappear and some pop up. And I noticed that this year it was analytical skills, then creativity, creative thinking, and I forget the third, but what they predict is that in the next 5 years, creative thinking will be right at the top. And of course, I think technological literacy will be sitting at around number 3, and analytical capabilities about number 2. So this ability to think critically, which is, you've said a lot of it, Jonathan, in terms of, sitting down at a table, that executive function, being able to work through what we know, knowledge, experience, the sort of 2 parts to wisdom. Where does wisdom come from? How does wisdom emerge? We don't talk enough about wisdom, but AI certainly doesn't have wisdom. It might be able to extract all the philosophers' ideas of what that looks like. And, I always think that there are no new wisdoms. There are only kind of reconstructed wisdoms, or refashioned to suit the time and space that we're in at the moment. And you'll find an idea popping, all of a sudden we need to be empathetic leaders, or we need to be some other flavor. And, every year or two it changes. But really, if we look at the constituent parts of that, there's very little new wisdom. A lot of it has been passed through the ages. And, kind of the stuff our grandmothers told us is now being proven by neuroscience and epigenetics and all of the other, there's kind of a catch-up thing. I always think that every time anyone publishes anything that says according to neuroscience, and then it's something that your grandmother told you to do, it's kind of real common sense. So that kind of, that ability to impart or have people think. I was laughing. I walk regularly with a group of girls on a Thursday morning, and we were talking, as we do, and we solve the world's problems. It's a bit like kind of group therapy, but nobody, without it necessarily feeling like that, and great chats. And we were talking a little bit about AI, and we were talking about the US spend on military versus health and big pharma and all the things people talk about on a walk. And I sprouted some factoid, and somebody said to me, "Oh no, that's wrong. You got it in the wrong order. I'll send you the thing." And I actually came home and I thought to myself, wow, I've been sprouting that factoid since I saw it in a graph for the last 3 or 4 years. If you think about it, I love what you said earlier, Jonathan, about how we understand the world through our own personal filters. And obviously at some point, that filter, explained that piece of information in that way for me. I mean, it's totally inaccurate. And I was laughing because here I've been, sort of liberally, helping other people with this factoid that is incorrect for so long.
I wouldn't, you don't go too deep down that rabbit hole. Errors are very rich sources of insight for a variety of reasons. We make a mistake with, you got to get it right. And if you get it right too much, you can't grow, you can't move forward.
That was the whole point, because it made me look at it and go, hell, everything is filtered. Everything is filtered through my own understanding of the world, my own experience, what was going on at the time, exactly as you said about education. What I'd love to know, Jonathan, is in your, I mean, you are with an extraordinary university that has a really unusual program. I mean, if I was a young person today, I think that's
Me too. It's very cool.
7 cities in 4 years. I mean, who could say no to that? I mean, I'd be right there. And in fact, I almost want to sort of rewind the clock a little.
Drop everything in general.
Yeah, there's some anti-aging that will rewind the clock. You know, thinking about that extraordinary innovation that's going on in terms of giving people a whole life experience, what are you doing at the moment that would augment that to take away some of the, I guess, the groundwork that AI could do to free up more time for the rich relationship-driven experience, all the stuff we talked about today?
That's a great question. And from an educational standpoint, it's tricky because even, like there was it's an analogous, I don't think identical, but an analogous furor happened in mathematics when the small, handheld calculator was introduced. My dad's told me about it. It's like, it was a whole thing, like, oh my God, math teachers are going to be put out. And it turns out they're not. But students do need a basic understanding of, they need to develop that sense that, hopefully some level of intuition. Our feelings are actually these very sophisticated responses. Actually, like safety classes are really good about this, especially for women. Like if you feel afraid, do not ignore that. That is your very sophisticated unconscious mind. By the way, unconscious mind processes about 3 million bits per second. Conscious mind, 16. So that is your supercomputer unconscious mind processing everything in the environment and saying you should be scared. React. It's prompting the reaction. So what we're trying to do with these students is get them to the level where they have some kind of intuition, because once they have some kind of intuition about math problems, about social problems, team dynamics, language issues, this communication feels off to me in English, which is often their second or fifth language sometimes. But there's something about this that doesn't feel quite right. Then they can ask the question and dig deeper, and then they can improve their own intuition. So we're not trying to get them to, what can AI help them do? AI is often great at that second order stuff. Once you have a kind of question, boy, AI can help you chase it. But formulate the question, it can't do that. It literally can't ask the question for you. Asking AI, like, what question should I ask, is the equivalent of asking the Zen master, it's like, well, what should I ask you? And the Zen master is going to say, well, I think we've discovered that the root of the problem here is that you don't know where to, like, you need some direction and it has to come from you. So AI is great it has been already proven and useful for us in developing courses. It's great for brainstorming help. It can kick you out of a rut. I'm trying to think of activities for this concept that I want to learn. And I've come up with this and this. What others? It can come up with 8 others. And now you've got 10 options where before you had 2. So once you're started, boy, AI is like this incredible accelerator. It's rocket fuel for that, for almost any thought process, in fact. If you can put the question into language, phew. But the actual framing of things as questions, this is also a skill that we underestimate. It's a skill that, I worked for a nonprofit where we ran liberal arts courses for adults, and our special sauce was no lecturing. All of the seminar leadership will be through questions. Leading through questions is bloody hard. You are the one setting the table. You're the one putting is it this or this? You've framed that as a dichotomy. You could have put 3 options on the table. So the person asking questions has tremendous power, but you can't share what you know. So this capacity to frame questions I think that's at the root of what we're trying to do. It's where AI can't help us, but everything else I think AI can, and we're going to figure out over the next generation how it can help accelerate math learning, how it can help accelerate statistics, social science, all of it. So like what AI can't do, that's what I'm more interested in. Like, where are these gray areas on the map, where it's like, it can't go there. It's just not a tool that can go there.
So, Jonathan, do you think as in the short term, AI does come in and take a lot of the roles that are currently already pretty mechanical. The jobs, even creative jobs, a lot of the creative jobs are still automated, right? You can see designers create PowerPoints. And so now you have AIs that can throw a PowerPoint together for you in seconds. So a lot of those jobs are going to be gone. And tying this back to education in the longer term, and this has been something that I kind of find interesting. And as we talked about before, Louise mentioned when she was younger, she would love to go to a university like Minerva. Well, first of all, why can't people of any age take time to do those kinds of things, to take time off to go to a university and have this experience as a seasoned professional or an older person? Why not? And so this is a couple part question. One, if AI takes a lot of jobs, and so many maybe that there has to be some shift in the way we compensate people, just so that there's a consumer economy that keeps our system running. Because if you don't have consumers, because all the jobs are automated, they're not making any money, they can't consume. So there might have to be a shift on the way we actually maintain our economy. So that might give people more time. So Louise, what you said about wanting to go to Minerva, maybe that's a possibility in the future. And that's an untapped population right now in higher ed, which focuses mostly on 18 to 24-year-olds. So that's one. But the other thing is, does it also shift in how we think about education as a whole? Instead of, oh, I want a degree because I want to be an engineer and want to get a job. Maybe it's, I have a job and it pays the bills, but I'm really interested in this. And these people at the universities have deep expertise. So how do you see that AI shaping that future? Or do you?
Incredible questions. The question about replacing jobs. AI is not going to replace jobs, it's going to replace work. And that's an important difference. For some people, because the job is scoped in such a way that all of the work can be replaced, that job is going to go away. It doesn't mean necessarily the person will be unhired or sort of laid off. They may be transferred to a different position. But yes, a lot of work is going to be replaced. I find it very tendentious, it's politically charged to say, it's going to replace jobs. It's going to replace work. And this is a much more neutral way of saying it that allows for, there's going to be some jobs that are just going to disappear because the work that they did was, as we suggested, clerical. But, is the work going to be reorganized? That's the question that I find much more interesting to sort of approach. How will work be reorganized? And so in education, yes, a lot of this clerical work of putting together a class, even sort of AI. I'm actually pretty sure that AI is going to be. I'm interested to see how it grades things like oral exams. Because we said I was like, I'm pretty sure I could train an AI. It would take some time. It'd be a really interesting project, and I've years probably, but to grade oral exams, how interesting would that be? Oral exams are actually a really powerful tool. Because it's how we actually often express our knowledge is in conversation. And so an oral exam can be a very powerful way to test, what people know. So it's like that kind of work could be replaced. So then what kind of work does a person take on instead? That, as you suggest, if we're going to continue to compensate people for being, sort of contributive, what constitutes a contribution? I do think that needs a lot of rethinking. And again, I'm going to point to the industrial model. Many people, increasing number of people are aware that our educational system in the United States in particular, but throughout the world, is based on a Prussian model. And the Prussian model of education was deliberately, explicitly laid out to create compliant workers, because that's what the new system needed. The university didn't happen until the 60s, 70s, where you began to see this tip. As the university democratized, it tipped into this model of, the talk about preparing for jobs became really much more important. It hadn't been that for 1,000 years. The university wasn't a job preparation place except for the professions. But its general curriculum was not aimed at a professional result per se. It was considered career training, broadly helped you Anyways, so that addresses that first question. And then the second one, I don't understand why we don't have sabbaticals. Like I just the basic concept of taking the time off. I mean, it's just fundamental to good practice and almost everything that we know. Like, and you know, one of my favorite examples is fitness. I was like, the rest day is when the growth happens. You can't take it away, or you don't achieve the results that you want. So this weird neoliberal model where it's like we always have to be striving or working. I was like, this is a breaking down model. This is a strip mine model. This is a use it up and walk away model, not a growth model. And so if growth is what we're genuinely interested in, then time off is that's actually where the growth happens. It's just, I don't get it. It's economically everywhere. It's like, where do the new ideas for the thing that's going to not incrementally, but leapfrog us forward, you know, sort of more wealth than we can possibly imagine. I was like, well, those are always the sort of things that it doesn't happen within the framework that's currently existing. Right? You know, digital technologies were not developed to, you know, sort of, they were developed in this weird universe where, you know, the government's funded it for a long time and universities, it was all happening really for non-economic reasons. And when it came in and transformed everything, well, that's because it developed in this alternate universe where profit didn't matter. We need more of that.
Yeah, this brings me right back to systems, because, you know, the machine metaphor, one thing, and yes, it has created unbelievably productive organizations, but at the expense of human beings. And if we're going to have the kind of, I mean, now that we have AI, and I mean, as you so aptly delved into all of this, Gina, you know, there's certain jobs that just become, you know, done much better by AI. I'm tripping over my words here for some bizarre reason. But you got me thinking, Jonathan, also with this, you know, AI won't take your job. It'll take a task. It'll take work. And of course, we're hearing everybody talk about the fact that AI won't take your job, but somebody with the AI might, you know, somebody who has the skills to use AI might. And that, for me, is just making a lot of sense. This whole looking at our systems, I think that perhaps this is one of the first things we should teach in education, is help people to understand the world, whatever they're up to, you know, right from the start in education, right from sort of, you know, pre-primary. What is the system? How are things interconnected? How does this thing pay off against that? And if organizations are looking to get the best out of it, I mean, if we sit down in any group of people, we can look around us and know that 38% of people are reporting symptoms of burnout. And I know in the US, around about 50% are reporting mental health issues. So it's not without cost. And my hope is that AI takes away a lot of the mechanistic stuff and enables us to live much more meaningful, purposeful lives. But, you know, some people may laugh and just say, well, that's nirvana. But I think as long as we keep punting for nirvana, we'll be all right.
We need challenge, but it is a question of what kinds of challenges we need. There are better, and I mean, this is part of a teacher's job, right? There's challenges that are good challenges. I talk to my students a lot about productive struggle. I was like, you need to be struggling. If I see you and you're not struggling, I'm going to come over there and make things harder for you. That is my job, is to, you know, the coach who puts on, okay, these push-ups are too easy, put on this, you know, weighted vest. Coach, this is really hard. Yeah, that was the point, buddy. You know, like that was the entire point. You get stronger through struggle. And so, you know, we need struggle, but we also need repose, reflection, you know, sort of those things need to be balanced. So I don't think it's nirvana, Louise. Actually, I really don't. It's strange that we think that it is. It's strange that we think that we can't use our immense wealth to buy what we actually might be, both something that fits into the Venn diagram, what we want and what's good for us. There is a place where there's a big there really is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time and for your insight and your wisdom. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And Gina, thank you so much for yours. It's always a pleasure.
Always. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Louise.